Now, today, what we're going to do is we are going to now work on day two, which is we're going to talk about some important kind of questions. So, we're going to talk about product design, metrics, and then we're going to talk about take home assignments, right? Those are the three things that you get. So, in the next 1 hour, the idea is, to ensure that you can reach a place where we can look at all of this, right? So, if day one was, thinking about your first steps into breaking into a PM and taking up, the portfolio challenge. Today, we're covering three things: product design and improvement questions. This is the most common type in PM interviews. You will always face it, guaranteed. Second, metrics questions. What success metrics would you set for X? What success metrics would you set for Y? What kind of products? Sounds easy, but it's not that easy at the end. And I mean, most people actually get it really wrong. That's why it's important for you to get that right. And then, of course, third is understanding that more than half the PM roles right now actually require you to work on a take-home assignment, which is why it's super critical for you to work on that as well. So that's the last thing that we're going to talk about, right? Now, four blocks, like I said, right? What we'll cover today is these four blocks. First is product design, the most, the block one, which is the bread and butter of PM interviews. We'll learn a 7-step framework and then we'll walk through an example of solving it as well. Block two is metrics questions. What metrics would you set for X, without sounding like you are, someone who is just mechanically following a framework, how you can answer this. Third is how do you solve take home assignments, an 8-step process to create a proper structure, a 10-section structure for your submission. And then finally, some common mistakes that happen across the three, because knowing what not to do is always more valuable than perfectly knowing what to do. Now, yesterday, like I told you, the framework is always the whatever we learn is just the scaffolding. Now you have to build on top of it and learn. And that's why the first thing that we'll begin with is product design and improvement questions, right? So if you look at the kind of questions, if for example the portfolio and everything that you build, the overall thought process is to communicate that you are good at PMing. Product design questions take it up a notch. We'll understand how. Product design questions, and they are also sometimes called as product sense questions. They are also sometimes called as product improvement questions. There are multiple ways in which you can call them, but they come in three core flavors. What are those three flavors? Flavor one is improving a company product. So, how would you improve Google Maps? How would you improve Microsoft Teams? The product usually belongs to the company you're interviewing with. So, if let's say you're interviewing with Razorpay, then how will you improve a payment flow XYZ at Razorpay, right? If you're interviewing at Zoho, how will you maybe improve one of their products, maybe their CRM or sales or whatever. The second flavor is improving your favorite product, which is what's your favorite product and how do you improve it. Now here, of course, the idea is to not directly just say your favorite product, not just say Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. Pick something that is genuinely useful and you understand it well, and then ideally to take something uncommon, maybe like Notion, Superhuman, Whisperflow, something like that. Even a non-tech product like some booking system that some person has used or things like that, right? Share something where you can talk about a genuine insight, because the interviewer has already heard about Instagram Reels and WhatsApp and all so many times, right? You can take like products like Linear for product management or Figma, even like Zoho CRM or something like that. Basically, something that you can speak with depth. We'll talk about, of course, how to answer these questions. And the third kind of questions is to design something specific for a new segment. So, design a vending machine for blind people, design a fitness app for senior citizens, design an onboarding flow for a B2B SaaS product. These basically test whether you can empathize with users who are not you, right? It's a very critical PM skill to know from there. So that's exceptionally important for you to do. Now, what is the interviewer actually evaluating? Five things: communication. Can you express your ideas clearly? Structured thinking. Do you follow a logical flow? User empathy. Can you genuinely think from someone else's perspective? Creativity. Can you go beyond the obvious? And PM judgment, which is can you make some trade offs and prioritize? So, once again, communication, structured thinking, user empathy, creativity, and PM judgment. The tricky part of product design questions is that there is no right answer, right? Two candidates can give completely different answers, and both can actually score a 10 on 10 if their thinking is strong. And two candidates can actually give the same answer, and one can score 5 and one can score 10 because the person with 10 was able to communicate their thinking and their process better. So, with that, let's jump right in to the framework. Right? So, here is the framework in front of you. 7 steps. I want you to internalize this so well that you never have to think about what was the next step, what was the next thing. Never. Just remember it well, by heart it so well. It should flow in a conversation. Step one, clarify constraints, goal, scope. First of all, before you do anything else, clarify. Step two, set context, right? Which is brief landscape check, what exists today, why it exists, and so on and so forth. Step three, identify users, brainstorm 3 user segments at least. Step four, list down pain points. I'm sorry, select one segment, pick one and justify it. Step five, list down all the pain points and all the three pain points that you are there. And step six, brainstorm and prioritize solutions, at least again 3 solutions by impact. And then finally, define your success metrics, right? Which is how did you decide that this is going to work or not? Right? So once again, look at the 7 steps. Very important for you to look at it. Of course, if you haven't checked, the video from yesterday is already on YouTube, so you can check that out as well. So will this one be in a day or so, but check, this framework is very important, right? Now, once again, I mention it again and again, and I'll repeat it here as well. If you go into a framework and give and say that, hey, now I'm going to use my 7 step framework and step one is clarify, it sounds very robotic, right? It sounds very rehearsed. That is why, and the interviewer is likely to have heard this from 30 other people saying the same thing, which is why you have to do it naturally, right? Follow the same thing, right? Ask your clarifying questions, talk about the users, talk about the structure that you have, but don't label it so much. The labeling is only in your head. After that, it's just completely you and your interviewer and you communicating it properly, right? That's the difference between memorizing a framework and internalizing it. When you internalize it, it doesn't matter that step one was clarify. Step one could be understand. Step one could be know, right? The name can be very different. What you have to understand is what does that step one mean, right? Now let's go through each step now. Step one, clarify, right? This is where most candidates actually blow it immediately. What happens is the interviewer says, how will you design a wheelchair for the blind, or how would you design a new type of a vending machine? And what happens is, the candidate immediately starts, talking about touch screens and payments and IoT and all of that in the vending machine, right? They don't even understand the problem. They just dive in, right? There's a very famous Microsoft interview story where the question was to design the airport from scratch. Now the candidate jumped in. He said, I will make a terminal, I'll make food courts, gates, runways, all of that. He spent 30 minutes in doing all of this work. And then the interviewer stopped him and says, you actually forgot to ask how much land we have. We only have 5,000 square feet to build the airport. Right now, the entire design actually is useless because you did not even understand the problem statement first. You just went in and jumped in. So the 3 things that you clarify right at the beginning at a product sense question is: first, constraints. What company am I a PM for? What are the resources and time constraints? If there is any specific product like that I want to use, then talk about that product. Any if, like, for example, they have said that, hey, can you improve something at Freshdesk, or can you improve something at Slack or YouTube, then talk about the fact that, okay, I'm assuming I'm a PM at YouTube for this. Are there any resource constraints? If it's a generic, like design a new vending machine or new TV or new wheelchair or something like that, then the answer is dramatically dependent on whether you are bootstrapped or whether you have enough resources. Second is goal. This is important. If the interviewer has not given you the goal, don't be lazy and ask just what is the goal, because they will just bounce back to you and say, you tell me. Instead, propose a goal, right? So, for example, for B2C, you can say that, hey, since Google is not making vending machines lately, this would be a new market entry for them. our goal has to be maximizing for adoption. Don't you agree? Or for B2B, for example, you can say that, hey, Zoho is already an established product in the customer support market. I'm assuming the goal will be to improve retention amongst these companies since the churn is the biggest problem for a product like Zoho. Does that align with what we want? So basically, you don't ask what the goal is. You actually go ahead and propose a goal and showcase that you understand the business. Third, narrow the focus, which is a vending machine for food is very different from electronics. So ask the question on what's the use case. A Gmail improvement on mobile is going to be very different from a Gmail improvement on desktop, right? A Salesforce improvement for an enterprise sales team is going to be very different compared to Salesforce being implemented for solo consultants. So narrow it down as much as possible. The requirements actually will differ, based on the kind of product that's given, the kind of user tier that's given to you. So that's why you should ask these questions right at the beginning, and that will give you a clear picture from there. Don't spend more than 60 to 90 seconds on this and move. Next is to set context, and this is again a quick one, 2 minutes max. The purpose of this set is to get the interviewer on the same page about what is the current landscape before you start solutionizing. So if you're improving an existing product, talk about what the product does well today, what its weaknesses are, who are the main competitors, and etc. For a B2C example, for example, Google Maps is a dominant navigation platform. Its strengths are real-time traffic data, very deep integration with Google's ecosystem, competitors including Apple Maps, etc., that are already there. A known weakness is the fact that the user side of experience for daily commuters is not great. There isn't too much personalization and so on. Basically, summarize what you've understood from the first phase. If you're designing something new, you can talk about the problem in general, right? What are the current alternatives? What's broken in this problem? Why is it important to solve it right now, right? Like for example, right now small businesses use client communications, email, WhatsApp, spreadsheet, etc. There is no single tool designed for them. So products like Tally, Zoho Books, etc. handle accounting, but there is no communication layer. So once again, if you're designing something new, figure out what is the problem statement and talk about it. If you're talking about your favorite product, then start briefly by explaining what you love about it. And if it's a little uncommon, then maybe talk a little more about the use case to the interviewer so that they understand. Right? A quick 2 minute context setting is very useful because it helps you and the interviewer coming at the same page, and you able to take some time to think further as well. The next step is to identify users, right? This is where you brainstorm user segments, and this is where the fun starts, right? So first ask the interviewer a minute or two to take some time, right? You can say that, hey, give me a minute to take and brainstorm some user segments. It's completely normal and expected. Use that time to write down three distinct user groups, right? Don't just segment by age ranges. That's a very common trap. You segment it and say first group is 18 to 25-year-olds, second segment is 26 to 35, third segment is this. It actually tells you nothing about their behavior, needs, pain points, right? A 22-year college student studying at a college in Delhi versus a 22-year working professional working in Rajasthan are completely different, right? If you only use age as a segmentation, it's just very lazy. Instead, think of the life stage, occupation, behavior, and accessibility needs that they have. So, for example, for a B2C product like Swiggy, college students living in hostel with limited budgets, professionals ordering lunch in their office, parents ordering dinner for the family on weeknights, and late night shift workers who need food at 2 a.m. Right? So, this is a great segmentation because you're segmenting based on use case. You're not segmenting lazily based on just age or something, right? So each segment you have to think about it completely differently. Each segment you have to think about completely with different context and try and present it to them, right? Now what you can do is you can mix some characteristics to make the segments even more specific and interesting. So stay at home parents who use a wheelchair, right? If let's assume you're designing for someone with mobility constraints, small business owners in tier 2, tier 3 cities, which where you go ahead and say that people are not tech savvy and onboarding for a B2B tool is probably difficult. Elderly users who live alone and only rely on video calls, etc. All of this becomes that. An important nuance is that if the question already specifies a segment like, design an ATM for the elderly and all of that, don't treat the entire thing as a one big group, right? Always create segments of users. Some can be, tech savvy, some elderly people can have visual impairments, some have, tremors that make touch screen difficult, and so on and so forth. These sub segments are going to help you to reach great solutions. Also remember, if the user, you have to also segment it based on user and decision maker. So if, for example, for an education application, the user may be the child, but the customer may be the parent, and that's important. So if your user is a sales rep, the buyer might be actually the VP of sales in a B2B case. So keep that user customer distinction in mind, right? It's very important for B2B, because there, when you're designing a product, you cannot design only and only for the user. You have to design for the user as well as the customer, which is the buyer, right? Around, practice, guessing and building this usually with 90 seconds. So in an interview, when you start feeling the anxiety, right, where you're quiet for 90 seconds and so on and so forth, that's your cue, right? So every 90 seconds when you're doing this, talk to the interviewer. If you're not done, say, hey, I'm still working through my list, but let me share what I have done so far. So keep the conversation flowing. Don't have gaps that are more than, a minute or more, right? That's how you should look at it. Then pick one user segment and justify it, right? There is no magic for which one to pick, but you must justify your choice, right? So you can pick any segment, but you must justify. So I am picking this segment because I believe they're the largest market opportunity. I am picking this segment because they're the most underserved by current solutions. I am picking them because solving them solves directly aligns with the goal that we have set. I'm picking this one because the pain points are most accurate and solvable, right? So essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to give a very clear picture to the interviewer of why you have taken a certain decision, right? And as always, confirm with the interviewer, does that work for you, or would you prefer on a different group? Give them a chance to get involved, give them a chance to collaborate with you, right? And of course, there is an example script on your screen as well, where you can say that, hey, out of the three groups, I'd like to focus on young working professionals who do their lunch on the office, and so on and so forth. Right? Essentially, what you do is you pick up one segment and you try to solve for that. Then you list down the pain points as per our framework, which is you go ahead and identify the pain points that you have chosen for your for your company. So critical rule here is that the pain points are not solutions, right? So typing emails on phone is too long is a pain point. Adding pre-typed responses is a solution, right? So pain points and solutions are two different things. So don't mix them up at this stage. For example, in B2C, in Gmail, let's say inbox overload is a pain point. Constant prioritization stress is another pain point, right? So many things are there that are pain points from there. So you could look at it, right? Um, Structure your delivery, talk about the fact that, hey, I have identified four pain points. The first is this, the second is this, the third is this. You can use a shared screen. You can take a notebook, pen and paper and write it on that. Wherever it is, absolutely fine. But pain points is something that you list, and you list three of them. However, unlike user segments, you don't take only one pain point. You keep all of them and use them for your solutions, right? Now, what are the solutions? Basically, first of all, silently brainstorm 10 ideas. Now, I know it sounds a lot. How am I going to do 10 ideas? But that's what you got to do. Brainstorm 10 ideas, and then once your 10 ideas are brainstormed, share the top three, right? First, two basic rules. What are the rules? Every solution must have stated one pain point, right? So, it must have solved one pain point, and every solution must be connected to the goal, right? Candidates who constantly propose feature that map to neither the pain point nor the goal, the interviewers notice that, and it's a bad point on your overall scoring. The next is, of course, don't limit to existing tech, right? Include a moonshot solution. So propose AI, voice, wearables, whatever new technology that is coming in the market. always include a moonshot, right? A bold idea from there. Even in B2B, right? What if, you're talking about a CRM and it auto generated the weekly sales forecast and so on and so forth, right? For each of your top three, talk about what the solution is, what pain point it solves, and what are some of the pros and cons. Now, discussing your own cons is a very strong power move in an interview, right? Where if you flagged your own weakness before the interviewer can attack it, you've actually done really well, right? So prioritize by goal alignment, pain point severity, feasibility, and time to build. The moonshot usually goes in the R&D backlog. So say that explicitly that, hey, moonshot is something that we'll take up later when we have the bandwidth. But goal alignment, pain point severity, feasibility, etc., is what you work from there, right? So of course several examples, and once you practice you get a more sense of building more and more solutions. But typically that's how you create solutions, right? Two rules: align to a pain point and the goal, suggest a moonshot, and then prioritize it amongst. You can use different frameworks to prioritize. You can use rice, moscow, kano model. All of them basically prioritize on impact. That's all you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the technical terms or the terms of that prioritization from there. Finally, define a success metric. So there are two categories of success metrics: user metrics, which are downloads, daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users, retention rate, churn; product metrics, which is feature adoption, session duration, task completion, NPS, and all of that. Of course, we don't have enough time to go into detail of these. So if you want to catch up on these, you can check out the YouTube channel or program as well. For B2B specifically, activation rate, seat utilization, feature adoption, and all of that becomes important. And for B2C, the user metrics that you see, which is the daily active users, actions done per day, bookings per done day, and so on and so forth, right? You can also define counter metrics whenever you define success metrics, where you don't just define the entire, you don't stop at only the metrics that allow you to kind of build towards the easy or the good scenario or the happy to go scenario. You also give some counter metrics where you give some guardrails, right? So for example, you may be optimizing for booking time or bookings on Uber, but you have to also look at a counter metric to ensure that you are also optimizing for the rating. Similarly, you may be optimizing for lesser and lesser time taken on quick commerce, but you have to actually also optimize for ensuring that um, for ensuring that accidents don't happen, right? So that is what is so important to go about from there, right? So that's how you should look at it. So defining success metrics is actually very, very important, and that's how you have to do it. Now, don't list every possible metric. The interviewers are not looking for a dashboard. They just want to see, can you identify 3 to 5 good metrics that actually matter, right? So that's something that you have to look. And like I said, counter metrics is an advanced move. So if you're able to figure out some counter metrics, definitely make sure that you mention it with your solution, which is where your solution may cause unintended harm. In all the product interviews, right, trying to call out gaps in your own thinking is a very good power move, right? It's a very strong power move because it allows you to actually take a lot of depth and say to the interviewer that, hey, I have this depth in my mind that I can critique myself on my own, and that leaves a great impression, right? So that's how you follow the framework, right? Once again, very quickly to recap the framework: clarify, set context, brainstorm user segments, pick one segment and justify it, figure out some pain points for this segment, solutionize and prioritize, and then define success, right? Let's take an example for it to become even more easier for you to understand. We'll take an example of improving Gmail. So let's assume that you sat in an interview and you got this question in front of you where someone asked that, hey, how would you improve Gmail? Right. So, of course, first you clarify. So, I would ask, are we focused on any specific platform like web, mobile, or both? Let's say the interviewer says mobile. Now, notice when I ask the question, I don't just ask questions when I clarify, I give answers as well, right? Like I said, when you're asking clarifying questions, don't leave it open ended to the interviewer to give you an answer. actually go ahead and mention some of the answers as well, right? So let's say the interviewer says mobile, and then you ask, okay, then what's our primary goal? Is it engagement, revenue, and retention? Again, question plus answer. And let's say the goal was increase usage. Now you move to context. So Gmail is a dominant email client. Competitors like Outlook, Apple Mail, Superhuman, etc. are very lowly used compared to Gmail. Gmail's biggest strength, of course, is the ecosystem play. So Calendar, Drive, Meet, they are all connected. Its weakness on mobile is that it is built for reading email, but not for managing email, right? So power users may feel constrained. If the last line does not strike you, it's okay. You can stop at the ecosystem play as it is. If the commentary bit of what is a weakness does not come naturally, it's okay. You can let it be, right? Now, we look at the users. Now, as we discussed, three user segments are needed. So, are my user segments? Power users who check email 10 plus times a day on their phone, casual users who check their email once or twice a day, occasional users who check every few days. So these three segments, I have picked power users. Why? Because they are the highest engagement group, they're most active on mobile, and they're always looking for productivity improvements. Since our goal is to increase usage, improving the experience of the people who already use Gmail is a great advantage, right? So now that we have power users and we know what they want, I have to move to pain points. So for a power user who gets a lot of emails, who is very engaged and active on their mobile and desktop both, and trying to improve their productivity, inbox overload is the biggest pain point. Too many emails coming in. I don't know what to prioritize, what to see, what not to see. Constant stress because of prioritization. I may be missing some email. What do I focus on right now? Typing replies on emails, because emails are typically longer words, so typing replies is a little problematic. Second, fear of missing out an important email because they might get buried somewhere. And of course, if they keep checking the email again and again, their battery might drain. So now see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a repertoire of pain points for this guy, and how I'm doing it is I'm thinking about someone who's checking their email every day, and I'm trying to think about what are the points that they can be pained about, right? Once I have my pain points, I solutionize. Like I said, of course, because the first thing was the fact that there is a stress around prioritization, I prioritize automatically via AI. So AI auto prioritization, the app actually learns from your response patterns and essentially ranks the best emails. Gesture shortcuts, right? So swipe patterns, pre-typed responses. You can swipe right. I think you already see it for a lot of mobile phones. That is there, and so on. You can have voice to text as well. Another idea that you could add from there. And of course, you add some moonshots as well, right? You can build other things, like you can build an urgent flag, and you can build text extraction and so on and so forth. But moonshot is voice to email, where your tone gets formatted wherever you just say it on your phone, and all of it gets done in your email, right? Now when I prioritize, I have prioritized it once again based on the DAU on mobile, the average email sent per day, and the feature adoption for the gesture shortcuts. And then of course, once you look at it, you get to give some metrics. So in the metrics, again, you give metrics that are related to first the product, and then which is DAU on mobile. DAU is daily active users, average email sent per user per day, and feature adoption rate for shortcuts. So based on whatever solutionizing I have done on the left, I have correlated it with metrics on the right as well, right? So again, now you have to basically understand that this is again the framework, and this is only and only going to work for you if you become hands on following and practicing each of this. Otherwise, what will happen is you will know the framework, but you will not be able to apply it, right? Because on when I tell it, it feels very straightforward, because you know we are following each step comes very logically, and the flow is pretty smooth. But when you are actually given a different situation, you will be in a place where you might struggle a little bit. Right. So there's one big part of this kind of question, which is the metrics part, that requires a significant double click on its own, because that can get asked as an independent question as well. Right. So Sometimes in product science questions, you end up with giving metrics, but metrics are so important that they get asked sometimes without being asked with product sense, which is why we are going to solve the product metrics questions as well separately. Right? And this is the same framework you can reuse to get this metrics. I know I did not cover the metrics in detail on how we got there because now I'm going to cover it. But essentially, the metrics that you see here that came in, they will come in from the framework that we're going to study now. Typically, the questions here are going to be, what success metrics would you set for Uber? How would you measure success of LinkedIn? Define some key metrics for Zoho CRM or some feature that Zoho CRM has and all of that. They will sound very simple, right? And they will sound like a very straightforward question. And the problem is that they're not, right? Most people answer them very randomly. And that is why it's a structure that you need. And let me show you what that structure can look like, right? So it's one of the most fundamental because it can be asked separately as well, and it can be asked alongside a product sense question. So that's why you have to understand what success looks like for a product, and you have to be someone who just not just names metrics for the sake of it, right? What most people do is when they hear Uber, they immediately start listing DAU, MAU, revenue, retention, NPS, whatever metrics they know, they just start taking the names because they're very confused. They don't know exactly what a metric means, which is why they just start parroting the names of the metrics that they know. But that's not product thinking. That's, of course, just a reading of a glossary of metrics. Those metrics can literally apply to any product, right? If daily active users essentially means the number of users using my product every day, it can apply to YouTube, Facebook, Uber, Paytm, PhonePe, Instamart, everything, right? Which is why if you have just given random metric names to the interviewer, you have actually signed a ticket towards you getting rejected because you've told the interviewer that you don't understand how to set metrics properly. The second common mistake is that people list out many metrics. They list out 15 metrics, 10 metrics. They don't prioritize, which means that the interviewer cannot tell whether whatever you are saying actually makes sense, right? So you give them essentially a dashboard of everything, but you don't give them any insight. Instead, there are four things that an interviewer looks for. One, do you understand the business model of the company? Do you understand how they make money? And do you understand what are the different users in the ecosystem? Now, this essentially means that most of the metrics questions that are going to get asked, they are going to be out of questions that you already know, right? That you already have an idea of. So products like YouTube, Airbnb, Swiggy, Slack, all of them that you already know out of, which is why it's important for you to know how these companies make money, right? Second, can you define success qualitatively before jumping to metrics? So success, for example, for Uber drivers means that they are staying on the platform and earning enough and keep driving. So qualitatively, can you define success? Third thing that interviewers look for is the fact that can you tell a story, which is why does this matter? What happens when it goes wrong and how does it connect to the bigger picture? And four is can you prioritize, right? So there are three kinds of prioritization metrics: P1, P2, P3. P1 is existential metrics. This is the must track metrics that you have. P2 is the health metrics. This is important but secondary. And P3 is a diagnostic metric or a nice to have metric that you can use. So here is a principle that I want you to like learn and in by heart properly. Important metrics are better than more metrics. Just because you have learned a few terms like daily active users, monthly active users, doesn't mean you have to say it every time. Quality over quantity, and that is the biggest thing that you have to understand, right? It's not just about the metrics that you come up with, it's actually all about the narrative that you build around it, which is why we will talk about our metrics framework now, which is the four-step framework from there, right? So what is the four-step framework here? Very simple and powerful. Step one, understand the business. What product are we talking about? Think about it. Uber has ride hailing, Uber Eats, Uber Freight. Don't assume. Think about what product and what users are being targeted with the product and what is the value that they get. and also understand the revenue model. Sometimes what will happen is you don't understand the revenue model of a company. Ask that. It's absolutely okay to ask it. Although, if someone comes to you and as a PM candidate, someone asks you that, okay, tell me Uber's business model or how does Uber make money? And if you don't have an answer to it, that's a red flag. If someone comes to you and says some abstract product that you don't know, some random AI product somewhere, it's still okay. But if I come to you and ask you, how does Lovable make money and you don't know the answer, then it's a problem, right? So that's why it's okay to ask, but it's not okay to ask for very common big products. For B2C, of course, it's very straightforward because, Uber riders get transportation, they pay money, drivers keep most of it, Uber takes a commission. So that's the business model there, that's the user model there. For B2B, sometimes it requires more thought, right? Why? Because B2B, what happens is the buyer may not be the same as the user, which is why you have to understand and you have to have per seat pricing, per user pricing, feature level pricing, pricing for different kind of controls, and so on and so forth. So that's why that requires a little more thought. It's okay to ask if the B2B company is such that you don't know, but if it's a company like a Zoho, a Salesforce, Freshdesk, Slack, and all of that, very well known B2B companies, you should know how they work or you should know what they charge. Second, map the user journey, of course. Walk through the entire flow step by step. Sign up, core action, completion, repeat usage. Basically, whatever the user is doing with their thumb on the product or their mouse on the product, right? Whatever they're doing, map that entire journey, right? Why are we doing this? Because the journey tells you where you place your measurement points, right? Every stage of the journey can have a metric that will tell you exactly whether whatever you're doing is working or not. Perfect. So that's how you map the user journey. The step three is you define success. So before you say, for example, daily active users, define what success actually looks like, right? And equally important, what bad looks like. Don't start with a metric, right? Start with a question that, okay, what do I want to measure in the user journey that I had? What is something that I want to measure? Are riders using Uber more frequently? Then that's a success question. The metric, average riders per week. Naturally from there, right? So first ask what you want to measure and then just give a number to it, right? So for example, for Zoho, I want to know success would mean that sales reps are coming back and using the CRM again and again, right? So the metric, weekly active users from the licensed sales folks. Very simple, right? If I have to measure if sales reps are coming back again and again and using the CRM, all I have to measure is the weekly active users and then their retention. Finally, of course, list and justify. So for each dimension of success, you propose, 1 to 2 metrics, and then you group them. There are three kinds of metrics that you say. P1, existential metric. This is the most important one metric that you will say. P2, health indicators, which is secondary metrics, but you will say this as well. P3 is diagnostic, which is a metric where it will be a guardrail metric around something that goes wrong. Let's take an example to understand and try and understand the metrics for Uber. So, what success metrics would you set for Uber is the question, right? Now, how do you set it up? Basically, very simple. First step is you clarify and you understand the business. So, what Uber product are we focused on? Let's say the interviewer says, keep it simple. Just look at, let's just look at ride hailing. Then two-sided marketplace where riders get value when they move from point A to B, drivers get value when they receive a payout. Right? Very simple way in which Uber works. Intersection of this value is where both sides are happy. Customers have an easy way to reach a point. Drivers have an easy way to make money. So very, very clearly, the point where everyone is happy is a ride, an Uber ride, which means that the ride is where all of it should align. The ride is where all the metrics that I measure, a successful ride is what makes a success story for Uber. Right? So I understood the business. I understood the revenue model as well, where I said that, okay, I have to figure out a way by which, Uber will take X percentage of a cut. Let's say Uber takes 20% of the cut, which means that Uber's revenue is going to be completed rides multiplied by average ride cost multiplied by 10%, 20%, whatever. right? So very clearly figured out the business model and talked about it, and also figured out that what is the biggest success point in the product, right? So for Uber, the biggest success point is of course the ride getting completed successfully. Now we'll go through the user journey. So if you look at the user journey, if I think about it, the rider's user journey. So we will look at what the riders are and try to build it from there. So what we will look at from there is to understand, one by one. So let's look at the journey of the rider. So the rider signs up, enters the destination, chooses which Uber Black, Go, Sedan, XL, whatever they want to use, wait for a driver to come up, match up, get matched, driver matches, trip starts, sit in the car, trip ends, rate drivers, give a tip if wants, end of story. Right? Similarly, for driver, sign up, go online, receive a request, accept it, go to the pickup, wait, get the rider on board, complete the trip, get rated, receive a payout. Right? So I've created a very thorough user journey where I have mapped up every single step of the Uber journey. Now, every single step here can be measured, right? What I mean by that is every single step here can be measured. So when, for example, the flow for the rider is sign up, enter destination, choose ride type, wait for match. Number of people signing up, average number of people putting a destination after signing up, so on and so forth, right? So everywhere in this journey I can actually measure, and the conversion from one step to next step is what will tell me how the business is doing. So the next step is I have to define the success now. So here I'm going to define it for three levels. So I'm going to define it for Uber overall, then I'm going to define it for drivers, and then I'm going to define it for riders, right? So let's first look at Uber overall, right? Which is now the overall success for Uber. What is the overall success going to look like? Now, again, like I discussed, we have to answer normal questions in English. So what can be Uber's success as a platform? More revenue, of course, more rides, more users, more drivers, better commissions. There can be multiple things that are there. Similarly, what does success look for drivers? Drivers, are they getting a lot of revenue on the platform? Are they, getting a good amount of rides every day? Are they having a good experience, a safe experience when they're driving? And are they not wasting their time, and so on and so forth, right? So this is where basically what you're doing is after you've understood the business, you are figuring out in plain English, right? Not in mathematical terms, but in plain English, you are trying to figure out what success means, right? So for example, here for Uber, success means growing revenue, right? Success means people using it more often, working incentives, and so on and so forth. Now, once you have figured this out, now you write for each of these platforms the P1, P2, P3. Now, not necessarily that you have to have P3 all the times, but you have to write it, right? So similarly for a rider, success looks like the fact that every time I block an Uber ride, someone picks it up, right? The rides get completed, the cabs are clean, the driver behavior is great, the spending that I do is pretty good, and so on and so forth, right? So what I have done so far is I have picked all the three angles, Uber's platform, driver, and riders, and I have given it a very clear cut flow of saying that what success will look like for each of them. And I have been able to define, seven and eight things that define as success, which means that now I have to go ahead and create metrics. Very simple. So first I will go with Uber, the central pillar that you see. Now, the first metric that I will go with Uber is Uber making more money, which means the total revenue and profit, of course. Now, is this a existential metric? Is it a supporting metric, or a health metric, or is it a diagnostic metric? Of course, it is an existential metric. Without revenue and profit, Uber will not be there. Number of completed rides, again, it's again an existential metric, because without the rides, you're not going to get it. Another thing that Uber can have as a P2, which is a health indicator, is probably the ROI that they're making on their incentives and investments. Right? That's another metric that you can have. Now, for drivers' success was when they get a lot of rides and make a lot of money. So, active drivers per week, and drivers' retention rate at 30 days. Now, the second is driver to rider ratio, which is saying that drivers are not free all the time. Instead of trying to look at driver to rider ratio, you can also look at the minutes that a driver spends on an average without a ride. That's also absolutely fine. And then you can write as average satisfaction and so on and so forth as well. Similarly, for riders, active riders per week and their cancellation rate, looking at things from there, that perspective, you would go from building it from saying that, okay, what are the active riders per week? What are the average rides per user and average rider rating and their experience coming together? So why are we doing this? P1 tells the interviewers that you are able to think clearly, and this is existential. If active riders are declining and cancellation rates are going up, the product is in trouble. So you fix that first. P2 metrics are health indicators, frequency, speed, spend, satisfaction, etc. They tell you if everything is going fine in a supporting way. And P3 help us understand why P1 and P2 move, right? So essentially how you break it down is you figure out success for a metric for a product. You figure out what does success mean for a product, step by step, list by list. And then once you have figured this out, once you have built it out, all you have to do after that is you have to go ahead and give numbers or give metrics to this one by one. Now, another important thing is that you have to tell a story, right? You cannot tell just a list of metrics. And that's why I'll spend a minute on this as well before we move to take home assignments and cover that as well. Now, what happens is if you only say, I will want to track retention rate, it's bad, right? You cannot say that only. Success, you have to talk about in detail why you have picked a particular metric, right? So in the Uber example, saying that success for Uber's driver side means drivers stay on the platform longer. They find it more and more worth their time. And you're looking at drivers' retention for 30 days is great to get a understanding. Now, why 30 days? Because the first month the driver is going to decide if Uber is worth continuing for a long time or not. And if we are losing people in the first 30 days, then we are going to lose them forever. And if the drivers churn, it also breaks the supply side and all of those things. Right. So once again, same metric. You've said driver retention and you've mentioned it as a P1 metric, but you've given an absolutely amazing narrative to the metric. And that's why there is a night and day difference in the two candidates. Right. So that's how you have to look at it. The simple formula of building a narrative is right at the bottom part of your screen, which says what does success look like? What questions should I ask? What metrics answer that question? And why is this metric more important than others? And what happens if this metric goes bad? Right? So that's the flow to build a narrative. What does success look like? First, talk about that. What kind of questions can I ask to measure success? What is the metric that answers the question that I asked to measure success? And then why is this the most important metric? And what happens if it goes wrong? Or why is it a P1? If you follow this flow, your metrics will always tell a very good story, right? Your stories are always going to be very crisp and the interviewers will remember it, right? Similarly, in B2B, of course, you would have to talk about maybe procurement, renewals, security risk, and so on and so forth. But those are things that, of course, once you practice different kinds of questions in B2C and B2B, you will get a more and more hang of it. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, and then we'll take more questions as well, is take-home assignments. Right now, what happens is you've cleared the screening round, right? You feel that things are going well, and you've done well, and all things are good. What happens is the recruiter sends you an email. Here is a take-home assignment. Please send it to us in the next 4 hours. That's all they give you, right? Usually, what it means is that, usually what means that you're going to spend your entire weekend doing it. And of course, that's okay because take home assignments are one of the best opportunities to showcase your thinking. Now, how I look at it is that when you are given a take home assignment, there is absolutely no reason for you to not nail it, right? It's not a 30-minute interview where you're under pressure. You have the time to research, think differently, and present a really polished output. So, just to understand for people who don't know, a take home assignment is an exercise you completely own. So, you get it via an email after your screening round, usually. And usually, you get it with a prompt saying that, hey, you can submit it by so and so date at 8 p.m. You may get a format guideline as well. But the prompt usually sounds like, here is some data, here is our goals. Please go ahead and solve this problem for us and create a document for us. Right? Some companies want a written document, some want to say that you prepare the deck and next week we are going to do a PPT, a presentation where you can present it to our leadership, etc. Some companies give you a lot of context. They give you their data, Excel files, users, feedbacks. Others say that, hey, we're throwing you in the water, you figure out what's going on. So in both cases, companies love this, right? Why do they love this? Honestly, number one thing, efficiency, right? What it happens is the recruiter can send this case study to hundreds of people they like, and then the first filter is people who do submit it, because people who are not serious about it will anyway go away. So whoever then sends the submission is filter one, and then in a quick glance, in like 5 to 7 minutes over a submission, people can realize whether it's good enough or not. Right? You can figure out whether this person has some design sense, can they communicate clearly, can they structure a problem, can they think about proper solution and metrics, and so on and so forth. There are two common formats that people get in these kind of questions. What are these? First is, you're a PM for company ABC. You have given a task of evaluating and launching a new product. What would you build and how would you go about it? Right? Second, improve existing product. You're the PM for Amazon reviews. Feedback shows that the users are frustrated. How are you going to solve it? Right? Or you are a PM to build our analytics dashboard. Usage has dropped in the last quarter by 20%. How are you going to diagnose and fix it? And essentially very simple way of giving you this there. Format 2 is more common, which is where you are given a problem statement and they want you to ask, because they want to see if you can work with the product context there, right? And increasingly what happens is, you will see a lot of take homes that come, and all of these problems of improve my activation rate, improve my conversion, and all of that will come in. The good news is that we've got a very nice framework to solve this, right? And that is the best part of doing the take home assignment. We've got a very solid framework to solve it, which is an 8 step framework, right? Let's quickly walk through each of the steps. Step one, understand the goal, which is research the company and their business model, understand the goal that they want, and map it back. If the goal is to increase engagement at Meta, what does it mean? More time on platform, more impression, the same thing that we did earlier. Understand the business goal, analyze data. If they have shared any data with you, if they have shared, you will get data in multiple forms. Sometimes they will send a spreadsheet, sometimes they will send charts, sometimes they'll send a website, and so on and so things, right? Things like that is what you come in and you try to interpret that data. Sometimes companies will send you user feedback as well, so use some AI tool to group it and start creating an analysis of this and start creating an understanding of the data. Then you figure out the problems. So multiple problems will come out from the analysis you will have. List them all and then pick the one with the highest impact on the stated goal. Very simple. So list all the problems that you find and then find the one with the highest impact. So let me give you an example. Let's say you got an assignment to work on a travel booking site, right? Now data shows only 5% of the users view tours and 3% of them book and 2.5% say that they would rebook. So three problems: discovery, conversion, and retention. Which one do you prioritize? Here you can prioritize retention. Why? Because even if I solve more people coming in and converting, if they don't rebook, the travel platform is not going to work, right? Because that's the essence of a travel platform, right? So that's why I would first pick retention, solve it, and then I'll spend money in acquiring users. Right? So that's the kind of reasoning an evaluator would want to see, not just saying that, hey, I picked retention as a problem. Next, you create a strategy. The strategy is basically how are you going to solve it? So think about 2 to 3 approaches usually. So ensure supply meets demand. In the travel example, right? get a better recommendation. Basically, solutionize, right? Create a solutionize method of how you're going to do it. Then again, like I said, define success metrics. Start with a big picture. What is the North Star? How are you going to break it down? The same thing that we did just now, right? Create that whole P1, P2, P3 bit of metrics and structure them from there. Then identify any pain points, identify any further pain points that are there that you can use. Pain points is repeated by that, so you can ignore that. So identify the pain points, again, similar to what we were doing earlier. What are the problems that are happening right now in the data or the context that you have been given? And then propose a solution. You can make a roadmap, you can make a wireframe. You don't even need to worry about making a wireframe manually. Create a prototype on Lovable, create a prototype on AI, and send that to them, right? Create a nice document also. You don't have to do too much of it. You actually go ahead and build it out from there. And that is something that you go ahead and understand. I think, yeah, the numbering is actually incorrect, so please ignore that. I'll fix it for next time. But yeah, you use Lovable from building a lot of these prototypes, and then create a nice deck. Use a notebook LM to create a deck like this. Give it nice prompts, fix all the bugs and errors that are there, and then send it across to the interviewer, right? So pretty verbose step. What is going to happen is you're going to be doing all of these 8 steps that are there. I'll repeat once again because the numbering is bad. Step 1 is understanding the goal, analyzing data, prioritizing the problems, creating a strategy, defining a success metric. Then ignore this, create it up again. There's just one here, which is identifying the pain points, proposing solutions, and writing the final deck. Right. So that's it. There's just 3 on the right hand side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is absolutely correct. So you can actually look at it as this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then ignore these two, and then look at 6, 7, 8. Right. So that's how you can look at it. So those are the steps that you have to follow. Now, each of this is something that we've already done. Right? We already did metrics in the metric section. We already did understanding goal in the product sense section. We already analyzed data in the metric section. So we've already done it. It's just about how do you build it out. Now, how do you build it out? You build it out with a 10 pointer which you need to put out, right? So there is a 10 section structure. So your take home assignment or the deck, if there is no external limitation, remember, if there is a limitation externally where people say that, I need to have only 4 slides, I need to have only 3 slides, I need to have only 2 slides, then this goes out of the window and you just try to squeeze the last one as much as possible. But if that is not the case, right? If that is not the case, then these are the 10 sections that should be there in your take home assignment, right? Summary, 1 paragraph or 1 slide talking about the key findings, proposed solutions, etc. Think of it as that if someone is, this is the first impression that your case study will give. So make this properly. Don't skip this. The hiring manager may end up only reading this and deciding if it's worth reading the rest or not. So don't miss the summary when you begin. Similarly, you go ahead and then talk about the business end goal, data insight, prioritize problems, strategy, success metrics, MVP solution, prioritize solution, prototypes, wireframes, and user flows, and then the roadmap. So these are the 10 things that you should have in your take home. If the company has already given you a format, follow that. Don't follow this. But within that format, you will always see some of these things will only be there. So you can very easily create that understanding within that as well, right? Once you have that clarity, then you go ahead and execute all of these things and essentially create a nice deck, a nice presentation from there, right? You can use this as a template as well. Once you have created a nice version 1 of this, use this as a template. I have a template too in the resources section. You can check out. I'll drop the link again. But otherwise, you can create your own templates using Lovable, using AI, using Notebook LM, and then use that from there. To understand some of the mistakes that happen in take home assignments, there are 7 common mistakes that I have seen. First is you don't ask questions and you just start. So shoot your shot at least. So ask questions. If they say that we just want your assumptions, then it's okay, right? If just say you figure out from what you want, then it's fine. but ask questions on the email. Drop a couple of questions before you say. Second, overshooting the length. Stick to the page limit if they have given. If they say 2 pages, 2 pages. If they say five, five. Right? Not any more, not any less. Even if your 10 pager is the this thing, the 10 page is the entire user ecosystem, right? So you have to ensure that you are following whatever the other person has given as a guideline. Second, not using appendices. So don't cram every graph, prototype, data, and main body. Try and say that main document is a summary of everything, and then use an appendix. Appendix is basically supporting data, some detailed wireframes, some stuff from there, and so on and so forth, right? The evaluator reads the main doc, and then if he feels or she feels that they want a more deeper understanding, they actually go deeper into it. Second, people try to finish it in one setting. Don't rush, don't hash out. If you have to submit the entire assignment, quickly as possible, still take breaks, even if it's 5 minute, 10 minute, 15 minute, whatever that break is, finish. And once you do that, your first draft will actually be much better than once you do it in a simple setting. Don't not citing references. You Yes, everyone knows that you use chat gpt and google, but always write the link of where the information is from. This makes your professionalism come out, and this really impresses the interviewers as well. The last is obsessing over that one big idea. So you don't have to obsess over a killer idea coming in, right? A mediocre idea with great structure is going to beat a killer idea with unbelievable. But think of it like this: most people, when they evaluate your take home, funnily enough, they might not even reach the point where when they see your solution. They would have taken a decision much before that, based on the kind of questions you ask and the kind of stuff you do, right? So that is why don't obsess with getting the absolute right one at the end, and try and make sure that process is what is followed properly. Finally, not balancing qualitative and quantitative. So trying to have too much of subjectivity, trying to have too less of subjectivity, all of that is a problem, right? You cannot only use data, and you cannot use no data. So you have to find a balance between when you are talking about user research, user empathy, and all of that, and when you're talking about your data, your metrics, and your numbers, and all of that. Right. So let's quickly, bring everything together in terms of, whatever we have looked at. So we looked at how would you improve X, the product design flow, how would you design a product, the product design flow that we studied today, what metrics for X, the four-step metrics framework that we studied. We talked about, the take home, and we talked about the two. You can ignore the last two. They are not part of this bootcamp. Now, there are a few practice questions that I want to give you, just like we did a portfolio challenge yesterday. I'm sure a lot of them would have taken it. And then, sure, please do share your work from there. But what I want you to take away from practice questions, screenshot this slide if you can, is these questions, right? Prepare these questions. There are 3 take-home assignments, there are 4 metrics questions, and then there are 5 product design questions that I want you to work on. And each of them are absolutely famous questions. They're absolutely great questions, and you have to understand them pretty well to be able to solve it. Right. So that is all that I had for day two from my side. Before I, of course, wrap up, tomorrow evening, we are going to do a mock interview, a live mock interview, where I am going to solve a product design and metrics question. Someone is going to ask me a question on product design and metrics, and I'm going to try and solve that live, so that we have an understanding, and then we'll take some live Q&A in terms of my approach and how I went about it. All right, perfect. Thank you so much for your time, folks, and I'll see you guys tomorrow evening then. Bye bye.